Hi all, I'm Vandana. Welcome to our Tuesday morning sales meeting. We have a really jam-packed meeting for you today, but before we get started on that, I'd like to push this over to Miss Shelly Panzarella with Prosperity Lending.
Thanks, Vandana. Happy Tuesday, everyone. So I wanted to share a success story in one of our closings. Not just successful because we closed on time and were able to get it done within a 30-day close of escrow, but because the borrower initially came to me looking to do an investment property. She thought she had to do this for her parents. She was buying a home for her parents and thought she had to do this as an investment property, putting 20% down. We actually were able to help her finance the home, conventional financing with 5% down. And because her parents were going to occupy the loan, we call it our parent loan. She was able to take advantage of an owner-occupied property, even though she was not the one occupying the property, but her parents were occupying it. So if you have any questions about our parent loan, it's a 5% down program, conventional financing. Make sure to reach out to one of your Prosperity Lending loan officers. In addition to that, we also have an FHA Kitty Loan. What that means is your parents can actually help to purchase, or the parents can actually help the kid to purchase a loan at 3.5% down, as long as the kid or the children or the kids are living in the home and occupying it as primary residence. They can take advantage of what we call our FHA 3.5% down Kitty Loan. So again, if you have any questions about either the 5% conventional parent loan or the FHA 3.5% down payment Kitty Loan, please feel free to reach out to one of your Prosperity Lending loan officers. And I'll kick it back over to you, Vandana.
Thanks so much. That sounds like a pretty cool loan, actually. I think I'm going to look into that from you. All right, you guys, jam-packed meeting today. I don't want to waste any more time because I really want to get to what's been happening here in the legislative session. Now, many of you are aware that there are legislative sessions every 2 years, and we are in a legislative session year. That's so 2017, 19, 21. The next one will be 23. We are lucky to have our lobbying firm with us today, Carrara Nevada, who is the lobbying team for the state association as well as our local association. And with us is Isabell and Joe, who are going to be basically doing a slideshow of all things related to the legislative session. We have been extremely lucky because Isabell has a slide presentation that tracks the most critical bills this year that have gone through. I know that Tom and I have done a pretty decent job. What they're going to do is really deep dive into what's been happening. Just to give you a little bit of heads up, Joe's actually worked at the legislature for 8 years and can put the bills this year in context of what is left of the process and what we can expect from here on in. I encourage you to ask questions. They can see them. Listen, we are Signature Real Estate Group. We are better than most people, so do me a favor, be kind in your questions. These guys are going to just get into the presentation and let you know what's been happening during our session. Joe, welcome. Isabell, welcome. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us. Isabell's going to dig into the bulk of the presentation. I was a Senate staffer for 8 years, and so I can kind of reinforce some of the things to make sure you don't miss in the presentation. Like on the front end, you'll hear us mention a couple of times, and Isabell will get specific about how even though a bill is dead, it might not stay dead, and the ways that bills can kind of come back to life at the last minute and surprise you. As we close the legislature, that's probably the most critical thing to be aware of. And then just seeing the sheer volume of bills that have come our way that we've managed to deflect. Just keep in mind, we've always had challenges at the legislature. There's always been bills that aren't as favorable to our industry as we'd like. But there is a bit of an onslaught this year. And so the state has changed a little. The legislature has changed a lot. And Isabell will cover that as well on the front end of the presentation. But with that, I will hand it off to Isabell. And if you have questions, just ask them as we go along. We've got 35 to 45 minutes, so we should be able to just take questions as we go.
All right. Beta, can you put the presentation on, please? Yep. Thank you. Let's move on to the second slide, please. So this is the disclaimer. These slides are the property of Nevada Realtors. It's a member service that we're presenting them to you. Please do not reproduce them or use them for commercial purposes. If you want to use them for any reason, you have to contact the Nevada Realtors to get permission. And one of the big reasons for that is this presentation is current as of this morning before they started meeting, and it could be very different by the time tomorrow rolls around. Things can move pretty quickly. Let's move. Next one. So the legislature, as Joe mentioned, has changed quite a bit. Next slide. So the state Senate is now 12 Democrats, 9 Republicans, which means the Democrats are in control of the state Senate. Thankfully, they do not have a 2/3 majority, and the importance of this is in order to pass any increase in fees or new fees or taxes, they have to pass with a 2/3 majority. Next slide. Similarly, in the state assembly, there's 26 Democrats and 16 Republicans. Again, the Democrats have the majority, and but again, they do not have a 2/3 majority. And since the governor is a Democrat, we do not have kind of a backstop to veto some bills like we've had in previous sessions. Next one. So one of the big challenges that we've had this session is the legislature, the building was completely closed to the lobbyists and the public until like 10 days ago or something like that. And even now, it's really tricky to get in. First, you have to make an appointment to either to attend a committee or with a legislator. Legislators are only allowed to have one in-person meeting per day. Then you have to show, go back. You have to show either a negative COVID test or a proof of vaccination. And then you have to go through the metal detector and all that jazz, which is new. They just installed that this year to reopen the building. So as Rocky, my boss, described it, is you literally have to strip down to your skivvies to go in there. Okay, we can move on to the policy issues. Oh, who makes the decisions for NVR? So this is a legislative management team, and Vandana knows this well because she sits on this. This is the committee that review every bill that we identified as having a potential impact on real estate, on your business. And then they give us, Carrara, the direction on what we should do with that bill, whether to support it, whether to oppose it, whether to just monitor it for the time being. And if it's a support or oppose or even a monitor, if there are little things that need to be tweaked or big things that need to be changed, that's the committee that tell us, okay, well, this language is problematic, and here's how we can make it so that we can live with it. Next slide.
I want to quickly say something about that. It's been a pleasure being on the legislative management team. We have, like I said, an incredible lobbying team, but more importantly is that with the management team, every single one of those people that was listed actually reads all the bills that are provided to us, but our lobbying team provides that information ahead of time. So they review every single bill that is submitted and says, here's the ones that are going to affect real estate, that are going to affect real estate agents, that are going to affect home ownership rights. What am I missing, Joe? Pretty much, right? That's it?
Yeah, anything having to do with the private property rights or anything that could possibly interfere with the close, we watch like a hawk. And so we watch every bill. You are a policy wonk by the end of the first session. Most people don't call it a pleasure to have to read every single bill. Because there's a lot of them, and they're written in legalese. They're legal documents. It takes a while to get used to it, but that's the cost of defending your industry. Is we have to watch it like a hawk. We have to watch every single bill that could affect your bottom line, your commissions, your closing. There have been from requirements of adding energy audits before you can close a deal to hikes in the real estate transfer tax. They've come at you several ways. So yeah, we have to watch all of it.
Yep. And I want to remind you guys that Isabell actually puts out a great newsletter every single week. You should be getting it. Is it Friday, Isabell?
Yes.
On Friday, it's called The Advocate, and it actually gives you here's what's been going on this week. And if you click on the actual bill numbers, you too can be as crazy as me and read every single one of those bills.
Well, and not only do the LMT members read every bill as introduced, but every single amendment that is proposed at every iteration that the bill goes throughout the process. That's sometimes it's a small change. Sometimes the bill is completely deleted and replaced by something entirely different. And we'll talk about a couple of those here in a minute. So let's get into it. Next slide. So NVR has proposed, has gone to a number of legislators trying to make some changes into NRS. SB 276 is the first of them. It's a technology fee that would be imposed either for the original issuance of your license or the renewal. So that would be $15 every 2 years. And that $15 would be segregated in order so that it would only be used to update the licensing software that the division is using and allow you to do more things online rather than to have to either use mail or show up at the actual office to do some of your business. So because this includes a new fee, it is exempt, which means it has to go through the Money Committee. So it has passed Senate Commerce and Labor, which is the committee that will look at the policy side of things. And now it's in Senate Finance, which will look at the financial side of things. Next slide, please.
I am super excited about this bill because we can start doing things online again, or finally for Nevada. Whereas, I mean, every state surrounding us does everything online. We're the only ones that have been sort of snailing it to the post office to go get our stuff taken care of.
Yes, especially for the people in the north, because there's no office in the north anymore.
Yeah, and with this bill being inside baseball and kind of wonky, it's not one of the high-level issues that we look at. But as far as impacting your day-to-day life, this is really important, because what this changes is instead of the division having to go to the legislature every 2 years and beg them to invest in your technology so that you can do things online and so that it's not a huge hassle, this allocates the money automatically. And so it's there, and it is stuck in, your money is stuck in providing services to you. And so it's basically an infrastructure investment in the real estate division. And so instead of having the pressure at the legislature be that they can't let your software be any better than anybody else's software because they have to have all of them equally bad, it changes the narrative to, well, their software is paid for by their membership. And so it just isn't an issue that your software is better than everyone else's. So you should see a benefit from this pretty quickly.
And this ties into SB 282, which if you understand the funding of the real estate division, and most people don't necessarily realize that all the fees and the fines and penalties that are paid to the real estate division goes to the state general fund. It doesn't stay with the division to fund its operations. So what happens is everything goes to the state general fund, and then every 2 years, the administrator has, through the governor's budget, has to request funding for the operations of the division. So this would propose that a portion of those fees and fines remain with the division, in order to keep the operations. I think during the over time, the division has seen its funding go down, and this is also why the Northern office had to close, and there's been a reduction in staffing. So this would ensure that there's at least a bare minimum of your fees that stays there, and to help you out. And it does include the $15 tech fee as well. So this is the same $15. It's not an other. It's 15 flat. It doesn't add to 30. This also is exempt because, again, there's fees and money involved. It has passed the policy committee. It's now going to the finance committee. Next slide, please. So this one has not been requested by NVR, but this would be a one-time appropriation to the division to do the upgrade to the licensing software immediately and replace some computer hardware and software immediately. So while they were hearing the two previous bills that I just talked about, it became evident that the need was really there. The software, the licensing software, is over 14 years old. It's very antiquated. And the company that has it has been sold like 4 times over that period of time, and they're seeing where the maintenance of it, and they're certainly not doing R&D on this software anymore. So there's a need that is immediate, and when they look at the tech fee, it would take about 4 years for them to get where they have enough money to do that upgrade. So this would be an appropriation that would get that done sooner. Again, we're talking about money, so this is exempt. It's in Ways and Means, which is the Assembly Money Committee. So it was heard. It has not passed out of Ways and Means yet, but they're ramping up hearings in Ways and Means as well as Finance. So we'll start seeing some bills with money attached move-ins here pretty soon. Next slide, please. So AB 237 is another bill that we've been working on with Assemblywoman Harigi. It's another attempt to kind of curb the HOAs from charging fees that are not specifically in NRS, and also to bring in line with another part of the law. There's one part where it says 165, the other that says 150. So this is bringing everything in line with 165. And there's also more notices on people that may have an interest in a property when there's a foreclosure. So this passed out of the Assembly, and the hearing is for later on today on the Senate side. And I don't know if all of you know how things move in the legislature. I don't think I mentioned this. So there's a hearing on in the first house. It has to pass the committee, then it goes and pass the full house, and then it goes to the other house to repeat the process. So I just wanted to mention that in case some folks are not aware of this. Next slide, please. So this one is really a clarification on the SRPD that an agent really cannot fill out the SRPD. This is not new. It's already in the law. However, there's lawyers out there that are ingenious, and if there's a problem that is related to the SRPD, they pretty much put everyone on as a respondent if they were involved in the transaction. So this, if it's a problem that is related to the SRPD, that cuts you out of that more clearly, I guess. So this also is going to be heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee later on today. Next one. And as Vandana will certainly tell you, there has been a ton of bills regarding landlord tenants issues, evictions, and all that jazz. So AB 141 is one of the first ones we encountered this session. and it had provisions to extend how long the notice period would have to be for no-cause evictions. And it also has provisions that would automatically seal eviction records if there was a default of payment during the COVID-19 emergency period. We were able to work with Assemblyman Watts to remove the entire section on no-cause eviction. Next slide, please. But before that happened, we, NVR, testified in opposition. Vandana did so as well. There was a lot of testifiers in favor of the bill. But again, we were able to get rid of the no-cause eviction section. It did pass out of the Assembly on a party line vote. Next slide, please. AB 161 was to get rid of the summary eviction process altogether. Next slide. We were able to make the change that the entire bill was gutted and was replaced with an interim study regarding summary eviction. So this may not seem like it's a big deal, but it's a big deal, and I personally consider this a win for you guys. Because it's an interim study, there's costs associated with that, so it was exempted, and it is now going to the Money Committee. Next slide. The sunset of eviction mediation was proposed to sunset by May 31st. Unfortunately, that bill is gone. It didn't even have a hearing, so we did not get that. Next slide. So this is the really ugly bill. It's with the amendment. We've been working with the sponsor from the minute it got introduced. We were able to get some concessions. Next slide. It's still a bill that we oppose. Next slide. So as you see, we were able to get rid of some of the provisions. Some of them are changed significantly. Next slide. For example, they wanted to reduce the period for returning the security deposit from 30 days to 21 days. We were able to get a concession to 28 days. So we feel that's fairly, it's a small change, really. Next slide. So again, we were able to get more stuff in the amendment. Next slide. Next slide. It's a little lengthy. It's a pretty good bill. I'm sure Vandana will tell you she spent quite some time reading that and the amendment. At the hearing for this, before we had the amendment really to work with, the committee chair. So typically in a hearing, you hear the proponents present the bill. The opposition side will have an opportunity to present, and then committee members have the opportunity to ask questions from both sides. The committee chair did not allow for the opposition side to be there to ask and to answer questions from the committee members. And then a weird thing happened that I'd never seen done. So she took the testimony in support, which was all by phone. Then she recessed the meeting, came back, introduced BDRs, and then came back to take testimony in opposition. It was very bizarre. Obviously, NVR testified in opposition, and one of the senators, Senator Selmayr, tried to ask a question of one of the NVR testifiers, and the chair completely refused to let that happen. So it did pass out of the Senate on a party line vote. We are still working with the sponsor on this. So again, this is the bill as it is today, but we're working on making changes, hopefully on the assembly side. Next slide.
Isabell, and
yep.
There was a question. What do all these bills about evictions mean to us in an easy to understand terms?
I don't know that there's easy terms. And frankly, until the gavel goes down on May 31st at midnight, anything could happen. We've seen this last session. Literally within minutes of the gavel going down, there was a change. So this is where it stands now.
When you say the gavel going down, you mean when we're actually done. The legislative session is over. There's nothing else left to be done. There's no bills that are going to be heard, no changes that are going to happen, no amendments that are going to come popping through on any other bills that might have died in a bill, between the beginning of session and now, right? It's a done deal.
Once at midnight on May 31st, or whenever, if they never do, but if they do and early, then there's nothing else that can be done on any of those bills until the next session or during a special session.
And how often do we have special sessions?
Oh, well, at this point, it's almost every year. We had 2 this summer, and we had 2 special sessions, and it was to deal mainly for the COVID-19 emergency. One was a financial session to make sure that there's enough money to pay for what we got. And the other was more of a policy to make sure that, we didn't have too much that we were spending.
So Linda, to answer your question, there's no easy way to explain what these bills are doing until we've actually got a final, this is what's happening. So just hang tight, and I promise you I'll keep you updated as we go along the process. Another question that did come about is, what do all these bills about evictions mean? Oh, no, sorry, not that one. It was, please explain a little more regarding the sealing of an eviction for the tenant during COVID. And again, right now, my understanding is that they intend to, if a tenant was affected by COVID during this time and they have been evicted because of it, their eviction will be sealed. And I know we're still working with the sponsors of the bill to identify what that looks like and how how tenants will confirm or, verify that they've been affected by COVID. I don't know if you guys can add a little bit more color to that.
Actually, I wanted to back up just to the last question for 1 second on putting things in context that's a little easier to understand. Just in general with landlord-tenant bills and landlord-tenant relationships, a couple things to keep in mind from a higher level. The first is that the summary evictions bill that got changed to a study, that's a huge deal for us because we actually accomplished 2 things there. The first is they were just going to end summary evictions and completely change the evictions process, moving it to a much more tenant-friendly evictions process. So it would take longer to evict them and it would be harder to evict them. And so we stopped that, first of all. But the second thing is that when you have something booted to a study, not all studies are the same. And so we also avoided it being a study that was rigged against you. We had input in what the study can cover and what the study cannot cover. And so not only did we stop them from changing summary evictions and changing the evictions process completely, but we also made sure that you're going to get a fair shake in the study so that you will know the negative effects of any bill that comes in the future. So those are both really important. On a specific micro level, on a macro level of what to expect overall with landlord-tenant issues, you're going to see bill after bill after bill after bill. We saw it at the last legislature, we're seeing it at this legislature, and you're going to see it at many legislatures in the future because there's a fundamental disconnect on the makeup of the legislature now versus when I worked there. When I worked there, there were 13 Republicans and 9 Democrats. Now there are 13 Democrats and 9 Republicans in the Senate. And so the state is not nearly 2/3 Democratic, but the legislature is. And so they have pressure from their constituency and from their caucus to, in general, move Nevada from a landlord-friendly state to a more tenant-friendly state. That's the verbiage they use. And this isn't meant to be a partisan argument. It's something where different parties are going to move things in different directions. If we had moved to a more conservative legislature, we would be having a move toward being a more landlord-friendly state versus tenant-friendly. So just to look at it overall, we're going to have to keep an eye on every single landlord-tenant bill that comes out, because there's going to be a lot of them, and they're probably not going to start up very friendly to you. But they have done an amazing job at this session with how many of these they've been able to say things like, well, wait, in the middle of a pandemic, when we're coming out of this and recovering, maybe it's not the best idea to completely upend the system that we use for evictions and take a wild guess as to what would work better. And so I'm actually surprised they were able to get that changed into a study, and then on top of it, get it put in place as a study that will be fair to you. So that was a big win. And then overall, I would just expect more things coming at you that we've got to keep an eye on from a landlord-tenant perspective.
I also want to remind everybody, or at least share with everyone, that we do have Realtor Champions now that are out there that really work with us. Haiti Kasama is one of them. I mean, she herself is a realtor, and I think that's a huge benefit. We've got a couple more that I believe are going to be running in the next race. So, keep track of those type of things, because as we all know, elections have consequences, right? And so we were lucky that Haiti is in a position now to help us and really educate some of these folks on what these bills mean to the real estate community, to realtors, to home ownership rights, to landlords, to tenants, so on and so forth. So,
All right.
go ahead, Isabell.
Okay. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So this proposal was a source of income discrimination, so that you wouldn't be able to take account where the income was coming from when you screen tenants. That went by the wayside. Next slide, please.
Can I bother you really quickly? I'm going to go back to that slide if you don't mind. Sorry. The source of income, I just want to remind you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, there still is a source of income ordinance in the unincorporated Clark County.
That is correct.
Okay, so this would have taken that ordinance and actually made it a statewide thing. And so the fact that this was opposed and is now dead is a really good thing.
Yes, but let's move on to the next bill. And this is where, so this is a broader discrimination in housing bill. Next slide, please. Next. But this is where a bill is not really dead until the end. The provisions from AB 317 were amended in SB 254. So we're still working on that. We are opposed to that section. We're working with the sponsor to narrow the applicability to something similar to what was adopted in Clark County. And in Clark County, if I'm not mistaken, there is a sunset date as well. So we still don't like it, but we're working with the sponsor trying to minimize the impact on you guys. Next slide. AB 308, that's a bill from Speaker Frierson. It would provide that you have to have at least a 3-day calendar grace period before you can charge late fees. And it would also increase the period for the notices for rent increase from 45 days to 60 days for tenancies of 1 month or more, and for less than a month from 15 days to 30 days. NVR is supporting this. We figured this is palatable. This, quite frankly, aligns with a lot of the current practices of a lot of property managers. And it provides a balance between landlord rights and renters' rights. So we are supportive of this bill. It passed out of the Assembly, and it was already heard in the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee. So we expect this will move forward. Next slide. This one was a bill that would have required property managers to provide a copy of the agreements between them and clients when they either applied for a permit or renewed their permit. So that is dead. Next slide. This one would have created a registry of landlords. That also went by the wayside. Next slide. Let's start about taxes. As you may know, there was a number of property tax proposals this time around. Next slide. SB 10 and SB 64 would have altered the secondary formula for calculating the tax cap. SB 64 would have also changed the rate of depreciation. Both those bills died. Next slide. SJR 8 was essentially the same as SJR 14 that we saw in 2019 and 2017, and it failed in 19, and this one failed as well this year. Next one. So on the foreclosures, there was proposed changes to the non-judicial foreclosure sales. It would have made it very messy to know when the sale was final. That went by the wayside as well. Next. Okay, there was a bunch of bills that were HOAs, and we can run through it really quickly because they kind of all died. If you're interested in knowing what was proposed, you can go through them, please. If you want to go through a little bit more, you can look in the Advocate. At the very bottom, there's a copy of, there's a list of the previous issues in the Advocate, and you can go and read what was proposed and exactly what died. Then some other issues that you might be interested in. There was an independent contractor benefits program, which would have been you put a certain amount of money in your account, if you will, that is administered by Dieter, and then when and if you needed to apply, it would be kind of an unemployment for independent contractors. Then you would be able to retrieve some of your money. You can skip a couple of slides here. Back one. So AB 331, and I don't have it in the slide deck, but AB 334 was similar. It was bills dealing with inclusionary zoning and linkage fees. It was the goal was to provide more affordable housing. We don't believe that adding more fees to the developers is going to accomplish that. And both of those bills did die. Next slide. SB 280 is regarding the composition of the Real Estate Commission. As introduced, it would have added 2 members of the general public. And then the amendment that came out was pretty problematic because the way it is worded, it would not require that any of the commissioners hold a broker or broker sales license. So you could have the whole Real Estate Commission being members of the general public. So we're working with the sponsor on that to clarify the language because it adds cost from 5 members to 7 members. Obviously, there's cost associated with that. So it is exempt. It passed out of the Policy Committee, and it is now going to the Money Committee on the Senate side. Next, you can kind of skip the next 2 slides. So there was a short-term rental bill proposed by Senator Buck that did not go through. There's transient lodging and short-term rental are pretty much that's one way that they term it. So this was to try to capture the transient lodging tax on the VRBOs and Airbnbs and that kind of stuff. Next slide. This is another bill that was completely gutted and replaced with an interim study. Again, that passed out of the policy committee, and it is going to the money committee because interim studies cost money. Next slide. So AB 363 is another short-term rental bill. It has not had a hearing yet, but I believe it has been scheduled for Thursday this week, I think. So we'll see then. I suspect we will see amendments. I know Ms. Wynn has been working behind the scenes with the interest parties to make sure that her bill has support. Next slide, please. AB 380 would have essentially done away with natural gas in the state by 2050. There was a lot of opposition, as you can imagine. This bill is dead, and we don't expect to see it again this session, but we expect to see some form of this next session in 2023. Next slide, please. So with that, I can answer questions. Certainly, Vandana can answer your questions, and those are the three main people that can answer your questions throughout session.
So I want to reiterate. So what you guys just saw. I know it seemed a little overwhelming because there's a lot of bills. I mean, just imagine being Isabell, who's trying to track all of this stuff and coordinate with the lobbying team and the management team and all of that. And these are exactly the reasons why we invest in RPAC, right? Not to like throw a pitch out there, but while we're at it, why not? It's every time our real estate prices go up, which is happening right now, they try to tax us and raise our taxes, right? So we have to be really, really careful about that. And just know, I mean, this year alone, we've been able to beat 3 bills to raise property taxes. Is that accurate? 3 bills, right? So, and it just means that if you're investing in RPAC, you're actually part of the team that is fighting for our rights, for landowners, for realtors, just our industry as a whole. Joe, did you want to run through do a quick synopsis for someone who really just did, because I've been getting messages like, wow, this meeting's a little over my head. And I'm like, well, I don't want you to think that. I want everybody to understand. I know that I don't necessarily want to go through the I'm Just a Bill song that's out there from Schoolhouse Rock, which I'm sure is totally possible. But just to give an idea of how this all affects us as a real estate industry.
Yeah, no problem. And this isn't new, but it's a little more intense than usual. It is, and it's because of what I had mentioned before about how the fundamental change in the legislature has been more significant than the fundamental change in the makeup of the state. And so what you've got is the state has moved from a right-leaning state toward a centrist state, and then you've got a legislature that moved from a right-leaning legislature to a left-leaning legislature. And that's where you see the big disconnect with what our priorities are on landlord-tenant issues. And a lot of this is education. A lot of the legislators don't know that 70% of all 1 to 4 unit rentals are owned by people and not big corporations, and that increasingly the most common scenario are people that outgrow their family home and then they rent it and they downsize and they've saved enough to purchase their downsize home. So these aren't mega baller landlords that are just raking in cash. They're not big corporations. These are just people. And so it's our job to explain to them that there's another side to the issue and that you can actually over-regulate the mom and pops out of the system to where all you'll have left are those big companies. And then you're actually legislating some unintended consequences that will give you exactly the real estate market you don't want. And so it's been a big education process with these new viewpoints coming in. And that, I would say overall, is if you look at the sections in Isabell's presentation, overall, we're playing defense on those sections. We're playing defense on taxes, and primarily that is 3 taxes. It's the real estate transfer tax, it's property tax hikes, and then it's a proposal that we aren't fighting right now, but we fight almost every other year, which is a sales tax on services. And how that relates to you is it's a direct tax on your commissions because you provide a service. And so I would also loop in accountants, lawyers, hairdressers, anyone who provides a service. But it would hit you most directly because it's just a tax on your income. So we fight those issues on taxation. We fight issues like requiring things before the close. And then the other big area that we end up fighting are landlord-tenant issues. And that, I think, is going to be the hot spot moving forward. So your big takeaway from today is basically going to be that we're fighting as hard as we can. And I think we're doing a really good job at keeping the changes from being landlord balanced to being tenant balanced happening very quickly. But they chip away every year. They get a little bit more every year. And even though we're having a stellar session as far as pushing back the worst changes, they don't just go away and give up. They just keep coming back. And so it's something where I would anticipate over the next 6 to 10 years watching Nevada become a less landlord friendly state, because when they put 20 proposals forward and we beat 16 of them, they still got those 4 through, and they're going to come back with the other 16 in 2 years. And so I would expect that it's going to be a tougher and tougher place to be a landlord, which could really inadvertently have the effect of causing rents to go up and making this a less affordable place to live. So, but that would be the big takeaways, or keep an eye on those sections: taxes, landlord-tenant issues, and then overregulation.
So one of the things we've had, I think, a struggle with this year is that you guys can't necessarily be face-to-face with these folks, right? I mean, you've had to do a lot of this stuff digitally over the phone. That's not easy because you need to be able to see people's body language and hear what they're saying and doing and so on and so forth. How has that become, I mean, what kind of a challenge has that been for you guys to really get, I mean, we've had a great session. Let's not, put damper on that. You guys have done a phenomenal job, but how has it been different this year?
Well, it's different in the way that, when our team is in the legislative building, they can see who's talking to whom. They can see where legislators are going. They can catch them for a quick minute and talk to them. And it's a lot of information that is missing for the team right now. However, I can tell you that every day since they were able to access the building, there has been at least 2 of our team members that were in the building. And we try to have everybody that's in Carson City in the building every day. But again, it's a little tricky getting in there. If you register for a committee meeting, they expect that you will be testifying. So you have to pick the right committee to sign up for, just that we have a client that wants to testify for those. So it's a little tricky, but once they're in the building, they can stay. So there's that. So there's a little bit. I'm sorry?
They just set up camp, a little duffel bag and sleeping bag and all that.
Well, without the luggage, they can't. They're not allowed to bring very much in the building. But yeah, it's very tricky.
So
yeah, and
I'll tell you the one thing that
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one thing I would add, having worked on the other side, on the staffer side, is this is probably the best session for Senate staffers in the history of the Nevada Legislature, because you don't have to herd kittens, and you have all these lobbyists coming at your office on the last 3 weeks, and you have to herd all of them because you work with them. In Nevada, your lobbyists are also your subject matter experts because we're a citizen legislature, and not everybody at the legislature is a specialist on gaming issues or real estate issues or now marijuana issues or all the different issues that come at them. And so you can't make them mad, but there's simply too many coming at you for the last month. And so I think the staffers are thrilled because they can push back on how many people get seen and to a degree who gets seen. And he's not on the call, so my boss is not on the call, so I'm not kissing up to him. I think one thing that's been a big benefit to us this year is Rocky, my boss, because he is genuinely one of the nicest people in Nevada politics, and he is friends with everyone. He's nice to the legislators. He's nice to the staff. He is endlessly patient. And that pays dividends in a session like this with the specific challenges. Because if I'm a Senate staffer, the first person I'm going to make it tough to get into the building is a jerk. And Rocky is like the exact opposite of a jerk. And so I think it's helped just having someone who has really long time relationships, and he's just really nice. And that pays dividends this year.
I've got the gardener at my house right now, so if you could hear that in the background, I'm so sorry. Now, I know that we have not just us that are fighting these bills a lot of times, right? We have actual alliances with other organizations that are, I mean, we have the Realtor organization, and there's so many others. We didn't really touch on that during your presentation. Would you mind doing that if you don't?
Well, yeah, on landlord-tenant bills, you know, we work a lot with the apartment association. Obviously, there's similar interests there. And depending on the bill, you know, we can work with the Chamber of Commerce. We can work with retailers sometimes. Yeah, depending on the issue, we ally with different people.
And we look for that as well because it leverages your RPAC investment dollars. Like during the campaign, we were supporting Assemblywoman Kasama when she was running, and we were supporting a couple of legislators in Reno. And so we sought out the Builders Association and a couple of builders organizations up there that were aligned with us. There's an old saying in politics, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. And it's not meant to be as Machiavellian as it sounds. It's just kind of a fact of life. That's why Rocky's approach works, being nice to people, because you need friends, and you need friends sometimes with people that you may be fighting the apartment association on 3 issues, but together with them on 1, and you need to have the relationship where you can tell them on the 3 issues, we're not with you, and then stand next to them on the 1. And so we're constantly looking for those both during the election season to work with people who agree with us on who should represent us, and then afterward during the legislature. And it is very transactional. It is taking a look at what bill you're in for, and we've used the words Realtor Party before, and it's legitimately true. We are not Democrats or Republicans up there. We are Realtor Party members, and we have a simple filter. Is it good for your membership or not?
Awesome. How, if somebody really wants to get involved in this process, right? What do you think is their best way to at least dip their toe in this?
Yeah, I mean, starting off is the Political Affairs Committee. And you know, I'll tell you honestly, a good test, because we have a lot of really well-intended people who this is important, but it's tough to keep up with everything that's important. You're not just selling houses, you're running a business, you're marketing, you have the compliance issues. I mean, it's a ton of stuff to be a realtor. And so start off by actually reading The Advocate on Fridays. I know that sounds like I'm oversimplifying, but Isabell's a good writer. It's a good summary of what's going on. If you read The Advocate on Fridays, or most Fridays, and you know what's going on and that's interesting to you, then afterward, join the Political Affairs Committee, or now join the Political Affairs Committee. That's the next way. I moved here in 2001 from Ohio, having worked in the Ohio Republican Party for 10 years. And then I came here to work at the legislature and the Senate. And we have a remarkable amount of access to our elected officials compared to most states, even compared to most states our size. Most of your elected officials have their cell phone numbers on their website, and they will actually answer the phone. And so it's something where in the interim, you can leverage the contacts we have through the Political Affairs Committee to get more involved and meet your legislators and figure out who represents us well. And then if you're still interested, then next time the legislative session rolls around, you can do what Vandana is doing and volunteer to be on the legislative committee. We are a member-directed organization, and so you tell us what to lobby for. We will research and tell you if this happens, if this passes, this will happen. If this passes, this will happen. If we fight this strategically, it may not be a good idea because of this. But at the end of the day, you tell us to jump and we ask how high. And so if you want to be one of the ones telling us how high to jump, that would be the legislative committee, and that's where you would want to end up. And there's a lot of work between now and there. But if you're starting off just with this sales presentation, but we are completely directed by you. And so I would start with reading The Advocate and then political affairs, and then look at legislative committees from there.
Fantastic. Thank you. So just as a reminder, you guys, there were a lot of things that happened during the pandemic that we were able to get a hold of. And that was because of our lobbying efforts. It was because of the donations, the investments to RPAC that you as a organization had made. So we were able to make sure that independent contractors were actually included in pandemic relief funds, for instance. We were essential during this time. We were able to stay open during the pandemic. We finally got open houses, thankfully. We defeated an attempt to end summary evictions that drastically changed the evictions process, and the effects of those proposed changes will now be studied instead. I mean, there's a lot of things that your investment has helped with, and I encourage you to continue to invest in RPAC. It's as little as $5 a month, 50 to 60 bucks a year, or you can become a major investor and do $1,000. I'm going to make it easier for you too, because coming up, we've got Mother's Day in May. Whether you celebrate it or not, it doesn't matter. We do have an auction that's happening starting today, and it will go for a couple of weeks. I think about a week and a half or so. I'm going to go ahead and post the link for you in our Agents of Signature page so that you can start bidding on auction items, and that bidding, whatever it is, actually goes towards your investment to RPAC. So I encourage you to get involved in any way, specifically in that way to start, and with all of the recommendations that Joe just gave. But I did want to say thank you so much to both Isabell and Joe for being on today. I know this is not an easy task, especially in the middle of a legislative session. So we appreciate you keeping us updated on what's happening. And for those of you who have questions about what's going on after this, I'll be more than happy. We've got several of us from our company that are on the legislative management team, including Tom and Chris, myself, and we'd be happy to keep you updated on what's going on in the legislative session. But more than anything, you guys, thank you so much for doing this today. I know it's extremely valuable for us to have an idea of what's happening. All of this affects our lives. It affects our industry. It affects our clients, and whether they're tenants, landlords, homeowners, it doesn't matter. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. You can come back anytime. We can come back after session, let you know what happened anytime you'd like.
Fantastic. Have a great day, you guys. Signature, go kick some butt this week. Go sell some houses. Bye.
Bye.